the #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.
Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to episode 248 of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments with me, your host, Richard Beckson. Today, we're going to be talking with Paola Ratana. She's been on the podcast a couple of times before. She is a lawyer and also partner at Legal She. So we're going to be talking to her today about how real estate deals go wrong and what you can do to make sure that they don't, because often they actually do, guys. So we're just going to kind of go through some of the details there, things to be wary of, questions you should ask. And as I always say, trust but verify everything. But yeah, if you're looking to do anything in Costa Rica, guys, we're actually helping a lot of you out at the moment, whether that's just kind of giving you advice on something you're looking to invest here or something to buy, an Airbnb. We've had some of you basically looking to develop land, invest in new projects, hotels. We do actually project manage a lot of developments and builds here in Costa Rica as well as develop and build ourselves. We have some investment opportunities starting at $100,000 here in Costa Rica in Manuel Antonio and Arenal. Very exciting. These projects are underway at the moment, due to be finished, one in August and one in December here. Actually, we have reservations on the books, if you can believe it. Absolutely nuts. But I think we have about $200,000 of reservations on the books, and we haven't even finished construction yet. But it's what makes these developments very unique is, again, we're able to leverage our whole network here. And as many of you know, I used to own the country's largest luxury travel company. So connecting into that is very, very easy. I often feel like I'm cheating. But anyway, you can email us info@investingcostarrica.com. That's info@investingcostarrica.com. Or in the description down below is all of our contact details. But let's get straight into the podcast. Good evening, Paola. How are you doing?
Hi, Richard. How are you? I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. Busy as always. And again, I know that we're keeping each other busy. So all good, yes. All good. But appreciate you taking time to join us here on the podcast, Paola. The first question I'd love to ask everyone is, again, volatility continues throughout this year, probably not going away. But what are you seeing happening here in Costa Rica with more regards to like Costa Rica? And then also like, is your volume of work reducing, kind of increasing? Just trying to give the users an idea of what you're seeing.
Yeah. So yeah, Western markets have been particularly volatile this year. Volatility in markets is not something that we're unfamiliarized with, right? It's not easy to forget that just a few years we were dealing with COVID, wondering how would that affect the market, and it turned out to be a huge driver in the real estate purchases in Costa Rica. We've had also the container crisis, which affected the volatility in the markets as well. Inflation and federal rates have been also recent topics that have caused concern. Tariffs also in the market, all of this is happening. So we're seeing the impact for sure. As you know, tourism has gone down, and it's estimated to have gone down, I think, 3 to 4%. I've also seen people in the recent months take a step back in transactions, being a little bit more hesitant.
Yep.
On the positive side, I do think that it's becoming more of the power is shifting a little, and it's becoming a buyer's market or an investor market, or at least I feel like that's how it's going to be for the end of the year. Buying real estate is always a big decision, and these volatilities in the market have had some people on the fence. But I also feel like, a lot of people are still very interested to coming. We're seeing a lot of, I guess, more sophistication in the investments as well.
Yep.
And Costa Rica at the end continues to be a very attractive destination. I think we have a great offer, from the natural perspective. We have volcanoes, we have beaches, we have mountains, all within very short distances. And not to forget that we're a very political, stable democracy, right? We've been like that. Investments have been safe here for the past 75 years. So I think that's always what set us apart regarding what's going on in the world. I've also been seeing, and this is maybe not related to the volatility in the markets, but I've been seeing a lot of interest in people coming and staying for good, like actually making a home out of Costa Rica. We've had a lot of applications from the legal perspective, a lot of applications for residency, a lot of interest in how can people get residency. not only related to real estate purchases, but also to people that want to come and retire here. And I think that goes about the fact also, yeah, that we're, a beautiful country, but also our medical tourism still keeps growing, right? We've seen a lot of growth in medical tourism in coastal areas, a lot of specialization. So I think overall we are seeing some, hesitation, but ultimately I do feel that it's stable. And in terms of work, we're still being very busy. Like I still feel like people are interested in coming. That hasn't changed. Maybe things are not as fast paced as they used to be a couple of years ago, but I see the interest is still on.
I agree. I think people are just taking a pause before jumping in, if that makes sense, and analyzing it a little bit more, which is smart
exactly. It's not a bad decision.
Yeah,
it's
definitely
not a bad decision.
Paola, this is a pretty big question, but like in your experience, where do most real estate deals go wrong?
This is a very good question. I think there's two kinds of wrong deals, or at least that's how I see it. The ones that should have closed and didn't, and the ones that should have not closed and did, right? And for me, the pitfall here is due diligence. That's key, right? There's a lot of factors that go into the due diligence when purchasing a property or investing in real estate here in Costa Rica. And I feel like that's where the most of the deals go south. For several reasons. I think some of the reasons is, not understanding what the client wants and what the client needs, and maybe just doing like a generic due diligence, right? It's very different, depending on who the client is and what it's looking for. If they're looking for a house to live in, if they're looking for a second home, if they're looking for an investment property, a permanent resident, all of that is different, right? And the risk that can come out of a different use that you give to the property or to the real estate investment is different, and due diligence should be targeted towards that. Having a good knowledge of the issues that can come up and being able to advise properly on the issues, be it technical or legal, I think is very important. And I've seen sometimes, over or under representations of risks of the transactions that come up in due diligence. So that's definitely, I think that's where deals go wrong a lot. I also think that communication is very important, and it can make a deal go one way or the other. Not only communication within your team of advisors, which is really important, but also with the counterparties, right? Sometimes in real estate transactions, you want to have, I feel like the best way or the proven way for me that it works is have one channel of communication. When you have multiple open channels of communication, messages start getting mixed up, people start not understanding themselves. So I think that's definitely very important.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, that due diligence thing is just so, it's just vital here. But I mean, I think the thing here is, as you come into it as Costa Rica as kind of a foreigner, you have no idea what due diligence is here compared to we're working on a transaction at the moment which you're aware of, which is like zoning, and there's no zoning plan, so it falls to the government zoning plan. And then like, what is those zoning regulations? And like, you need to speak to engineers that understand, the zoning regulations. But
and I think that's that's why also having a good team like assembled for due diligence is key. Right. Because it cannot only fall, the responsibility cannot fall only on one person.
Correct.
And I think that's important.
I mean, ultimately, as we like to say, the throat to choke is the lawyer, no? Because it's them that puts that kind of team together and oversees due diligence. And I mean, we share that, that responsibility a lot when we work, with lawyers as well, because, we have a lot of technical people here in the business. But I agree, like, it's really important to have a great team. But like, what should people understand about like each person's roles and those limitations? As I said there, I mean, ultimately, I think that the king or queen, of course, is the lawyer.
Yeah, I think that having the team is everything, right? Because it's the people that you're relying on to get the advice. Like I said before, communication is very important, and it can throw off a deal. So if you have multiple people carrying that, I don't know, the baton or the communication, it can get sketchy. So definitely understanding the roles of each of the parties and it depends on the transaction. Sometimes you have just a real estate agent and the lawyer, but sometimes you have financial advisors, two agents or two real estate agents, you have builders, you have topographers,
Yep.
home inspectors, right? But who's coordinating all of that? And for sure, for me, this is maybe a sports analogy. Not maybe, it's a sports analogy, but if you have a bad coach, you're not going to be playing a great game, right? And if your team's not solid, you're probably not going to be taking the best decisions. So understanding the role of each of the participants is key, and coordinating them is also very important, right? Who is coordinating them, and keeping tabs of the times as well.
Yep.
In real estate transactions here, we work with very limited time. Sometimes, most of the times, we have dates that we need to comply with in terms of when do the agreements get signed, when do the deposits due, when is the due diligence period over, how much time do you have for closing. And if somebody's not coordinating these things appropriately, the transaction can feel sloppy, and I think it could go south, right?
Who is usually responsible for project managing that?
I think the attorney is responsible for managing the due diligence overall, right? It depends a lot on the type of transaction, because if you are, for example, buying to build, for example, you want to make sure, sometimes it depends on the size of the investment, you want to actually have a project manager in the equation, right? To manage even due diligence. But I think the attorney is always the one that's measuring the pace.
Yep.
Some agents have a very important role in that as well. And what I like to do is, whenever I have a transaction, is set up the expectations on who is doing what, because some things definitely have to be handled by the attorneys. Some things can be handled by the agents, for example. But I think clarity on what will be communicated and by who is very important. And that's why the communication within the team is also essential, right?
Okay.
Understanding who is leading, who's following, and at what points. Sometimes those roles can complement each other, but it's important to understand when one steps in over the other. Yeah.
I've always thought that the transaction, though, of purchasing real estate in Costa Rica is not completely unbiased, if that makes sense. Or there is always incentives, meaning the realtor doesn't get paid until you buy, the lawyer doesn't get paid until you buy. So, I mean, it's a very thin, line to kind of walk, if that makes sense. And like I've seen cases before where a deal should not have happened, and it did happen, if that makes sense. So my question to you is, should you trust your lawyer 100%? Should you put all your trust in them? Should you take the referral from the real estate agent? Like, what things should you be doing? What things should you be asking? And what should you clearly understand of look, guys, you need to understand this limitation.
Yeah. I think it's true what you're saying. Like, we have sometimes, people, most of the time, if you're a foreign investor, you're coming here and you don't know anybody, right? You don't have any clue on how the transactions work. You have no clue who the players are in the market. I think it's always important and essential to work with people you trust, right? If you don't trust your investment advisor, if you don't trust your agent, if you don't trust your lawyer, you should not be doing business with them. So knowing them is a first step, right? I feel like regardless of where the source or the referral comes from, it's important to actually get to know and work with them. And, personally, the only people that I trust 100% are my mom and the ministry of the tax authorities collecting my taxes at the end of the year, right? That's the only people that I trust. But I'm a lawyer, right? I get paid to be suspicious. I do often see people doing or trying to do nasty things in this business. Not gonna lie about that. So I will never work with anybody that I don't know or that I don't trust. Yeah. So for me,
as the buyer, should I go online and check these people out, et cetera, just to make sure? Because I'm sure if something bad had happened, you'll find something online.
I think it's important to do as a buyer, as an investor, you should do your diligence as well, right? And most of the time, that trust that we're talking about also comes with the trust to accept recommendations from other professionals. Yeah. But I wouldn't rely solely on that, right? you need to know them and you need to trust them or get to know them.
I mean, I see clients sometimes, people that I, know on Facebook are like, hey, I'm thinking about working with this person. Has anyone had any experience or know anything, because I mean, this country's tiny. It's like a town.
Yeah.
Like everyone knows everyone. And the moment you do something wrong, everybody knows.
Everybody knows. Yeah. And there's a lot of groups I'm sure you're aware of, right?
Yep.
Investing in Costa Rica, I think, building and
yep.
I feel building and I don't remember what the names are, but there are a lot of Facebook groups around and people get also like ask for recommendations there.
Yeah.
So I think that those sources should not be disregarded as well, right?
I agree.
And yeah, I feel like trusting 100% in somebody is
trust but verify.
Yeah, exactly. Trust by verify.
A lot of the time I've seen stuff go wrong is on land. Buying a house that's already existing, typically it's there. They're not going to come over and go, hey, you didn't have permits for this, knock it down. It's been there for 20 years, if that makes sense. Like it is what it is. But buying land for the project that you want to do, what are some of the extra steps that you should take to make sure you can do what you want with it?
Yeah, buying land is always a complex interplay, right? I always think like the more you study, the more you can make sure that you're investing properly to do what you can do, but also the more money you're putting into a study and not in the investments.
Yep.
So you have to find like a sweet spot when you're dealing with land, and understand the level of diligence that is required. I think it looks very different also if you're gonna build one house in a small property, or if you're gonna build a bigger house in a bigger property, or if you're gonna build an investment of 3 or 4 houses, right? But I do think that it is important understanding the regulations and then again assembling a good team when you're buying land. I think having an engineer on board whenever you're dealing with that even if you're not paying him to actually do planos or construction yet, you might want to engage them and just have them on board to be able to ask certain questions, right? Verify certain aspects because there's a lot that goes into it, and we've recently seen but questions on setbacks, on heights of buildings, all of these technical requirements that people want to know. And many times people they want to do it all, right? Sometimes they feel more comfortable doing it. And then some people just rather save a little on that and wing it some more. For me, at least, I think at a minimum, the topography study and the soil study when you're buying land is essential, right? As a minimum.
A lot of people buy without doing a soil study, and I'm always in two minds about it. I always get it done anyway because I know I'm going to need it during construction anyway. But like, it's just more of like what is underneath the land, meaning that if I know my foundations are going to cost me an absolute fortune, or I don't know, we have bad infiltration in the water and I need to do a bias, water treatment plant that's going to increase my cost. Like I need to know what I can't see.
Yes. That for me is key as well. That's why I always say, like, if you're buying land and you're actually planning to construct it, maybe even like if you're trying to flip it, maybe you could go without the soil study. But the thing is, a potential buyer could come and do it as well, right? And what I like to tell my clients is, it's not that you cannot be. It's probably the outcome of a soil study is not never going to tell you like you can't build, but it's going to tell you how much it will cost, right? And it is very different.
Yeah.
If you're buying a land and then you think you're getting for cheap, but then in order to start building, you need to invest $50,000 to bring it up to the street level, for example. All of those things, I think it is important. And for me, the soil study is not as much as are you going to be able to do something with the property, is more of how much is it actually going to cost, and do those numbers actually make sense for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, we're working on a property that's beachfront at the moment, and I know that a bunch of landfill was put in there, and I don't know whether they compacted it properly and did the right studies on it. And, the developers were like, no, you don't need soil study tests. Like, look, it's a condominium, everything's good. And I'm like, I watched, 2-3 meters of like fill being used here. Like, get the study done, because if you need to take that out and re-put it in, it's going to cost a lot of money.
It's going to be a lot of money. Yeah. Also, then also most builders are not going to start building without a soil study, right?
Correct.
At least most builders will not do that.
And for
And
permanent,
so you need it anyways, exactly, eventually. So yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of just buying and say, well, I'll build this in 5 years, well, maybe you can do without, but eventually you're going to require it. So you might as well, I think you might as well know it while you still can get out of the deal
yeah.
than knowing it in the future when you're already in.
A lot of the time people are using escrow to purchase, and they're like, do I
Mhm.
need escrow? And I'm always like, yeah, you need escrow. You need that third party, because it's like, hey, you don't want to send money to the seller and then they disappear, because it can happen.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's happened before. People sometimes with escrow are like, oh God, I mean, they should always be using it, do you think?
I think most people ask that question a lot, and I think it's advisable to do so. First, because most of the transactions here require a deposit, right?
Yeah.
It requires an initial deposit to make sure that the seller is going to take the property out of the market. Basically, if you're not giving a deposit to the seller, you're not showing your actual willingness, right, to purchase.
Yeah.
So they're not going to take you seriously. And you don't want to give that to them. I think, yes, disappearing can be a reason, right? But there could be also many other reasons. For example, something can happen to the person. What if in the middle of the due diligence this person passes and they already have the money in their account? Do you want to go and deal with their estate, like their probate process to get your money back? You might have a contract that allows you to do that, right? But is it difficult? I think you can save a lot of headaches by using an escrow. It's also, we have very strict anti-money laundering policies here in Costa Rica as well. So using an escrow also facilitates that process a lot, right? If you don't use an escrow, you can pay the seller, but the money's not going to be credited to the seller's account until the funds have been cleared, right?
And then you need to
And
give
so,
them a bunch of documentation to the seller, which you probably don't want to give you tax returns. And, whereas you,
exactly. So it for sure the escrow works as a protecting agent between the parties. And I think also what the fact of, here we have a public registry system, as you know, right? So all real estate transactions that when you're purchasing a property directly have to be recorded in the public registry and done before a notary. So if you don't use an escrow, the seller's not going to sign anything until they have their money, right? So what happens first? Do you transfer is it somebody going to be willing to transfer without having the money? So escrow for me are a must. I think most foreign clients have no problem using escrows. I've come some resistance to Costa Rican clients that they just want their money deposited directly. So sometimes that's something that you have to deal, and you have to understand that escrow is like a protecting agent for both parties.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm just trying to think here, because I mean, some people are like, well, escrow complicates stuff sometimes, that when you want to get out of the deal, like during due diligence, you don't want this, then getting the money back can be a pain, and etc.
Yeah, having a good contract is really important, because at the end of the day, the escrow is going to follow the party's intent, right? And the party's intent has to be documented in in a in a in a purchase agreement, and it has to be very specific. I've had those cases where we're already like usually when you're in due diligence, it's very clear, right? The instructions are very clear. Until due diligence ends, the money is completely refundable to the buyer. But also, if there's a lot of things that maybe can happen after due diligence ends and before closing, where a potential buyer might want to get their money back, right?
Yeah.
If the seller decides they don't want to sign, well, that's an easy one for the escrow. But if there's some misrepresentations on the reps and warranties of the contract, right? And if you're specific about the fact that if this is not correct and accurate as of closing, you can get your money back. I haven't had problems with escrow returning after the due diligence, but a good contract is the base, and giving the escrow in clear instructions is crucial.
How often have you had it where the seller doesn't want to sell during, you're in due diligence, you're getting to closing, and the seller doesn't want to sell? Because I had some friends that did that, and they had the contract and they forced the sale through. Like they had to go to court, but like they forced it through. It took like a year and a half, I think it was. But in the end, they got the property.
Yeah. I've only seen it. I've only had it personally once.
Yep.
That the seller didn't want to sell. And I think it was a lot of factors going into it. personally for him that affected his decision. And ultimately, it was hard for the buyer. He decided not to pursue in that case, so not to go to court and pursue, because yeah, if they have the right, if they were already committed to it, right? So they have to sell it. But this person decided not to go to court to force it. But the seller in that case, because I think he was kind of feeling some remorse, was willing to reimburse the buyer. In that he got lucky, of course, but to reimburse him for some expenses that they had incurred. But yeah, it's, I don't think it's very common. I guess because they go through a very long process when they're listing their property, right? And it depends on the seller. But if it's a seller that's gone through the process, they probably sign listing agreements with their agents. They've gone through also their studies of their own, right? They've made some changes. Happens sometimes when sellers are not advised properly, that you can have some hiccups in the transaction. Not necessarily not sell, but for example, realizing that there were much more expenses that they had to pay, so they calculated the taxes wrong. And so,
I mean,
yeah.
look, if you're paying taxes after you've sold something like capital gains tax, you had a gain. So like, come on, like what I mean, yeah, I mean, you had a gain, you know.
Yeah, but it's interesting because some people still don't know that those things exist, right? And you think it's not likely that that happens, but yeah, I've had sellers say, why capital gains? And maybe because they don't have a good advisor on the other side, right? And that's I think assembling a good team or having a good team works equally as important in the buyer side than in the seller side.
Paola, and you're not a tax lawyer, but like, if someone has a second home in Costa Rica and sells it, do they need to pay, like a foreigner, do they need to pay capital gains tax on it when they sell it?
Yes, they do have to pay capital gains tax when they sell it. So
Okay.
capital gains tax is payable every time you sell and you have a gain, right? You have to pay. There's two options. This we didn't have capital gains tax. I think this is something that is important before 2019. I think many people from different countries always tell me, "Wow, that's impressive, right? We only got it until 2019." And so the law says basically you pay 15% of the gain, but if you purchase before 2019, you're allowed to do 2.5%
Sale price.
of the purchase price. Yeah. And then there's another indication that says if you're a non-domiciled residence, the buyer has to retain 2.25% of the purchase price. So I think that's where people get a little confused on it, but it's still payable. Like, I mean, they should still pay the 15%.
Many people really pay it, Paola, because, you know.
Well, if you're a non-domiciled resident, you have to, the money's gonna be withheld from you, right? How many people pay it? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the taxes are self-declared, right?
I mean, I pay tax every time we sell a property. So, you know, my accountant just tells me this is what you got to pay, and we pay it.
Yeah. The thing is also, we have a public, again, and not to go about this, but this is very different than other systems, right? We have a public registry system. So eventually it's pretty easy if the tax authorities wanted to track the price by which you bought, and then the price by which you sold. It's public. That's public record.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's very smart not to pay for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, Paola, I've kept you long enough. So my last question for you. If you inherited $500,000 and you had to invest it in a business or real estate in Costa Rica, what would you invest it in? And you can't say, give it to me.
No. This question, I've changed a lot whenever I think about this question right now. And I feel it's because I see a lot of things, right, in my profession. Right now, I think I'm leaning towards the south, but like colder climates. Maybe something in Pérez Celedón. I've been thinking like a farm in Pérez Celedón. I think it's a good location because it's not that far away from San Jose, but it's also very close to the beach, and it has like a good climate. So that's where I am right now.
Tons of water, 2 harvests a year, 45
Yeah.
minutes to the beach. Okay, it's 2 hours to San
Mhm.
Jose. They should have a flight actually from Pedernales to San Jose.
Right. Maybe we'll get it soon. I think it's a good place to invest right now because it's
Yeah.
the like mhm, mhm.
Direct from San Jose. But yeah, I mean, that was just to the hotel. But look, you know, I mean, that central southern mountainous zone, I absolutely love it just because the climate, you know, yeah.
Yeah, but it's so close to the beach as well. I mean, everything here is close, but that's like really
Really
close.
close. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, two beautiful beaches. So
I
I
think
think
it's
that's where I would put my money right now.
I think it's just fighting traffic from San Jose if you live there to get, you know, to get over. It's getting better, don't get me wrong. The circunnavegación, Catargo is being like, you know, but once you start going up Silla Muerte, if you're behind a truck,
Yeah, you're stuck there.
yeah. So cool.
Yes, yes, yes.
Paola, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here on the podcast. Thanks very much for you know, being very, I would say, open with us on some of the questions here, because I know some of them were a little touchy. But anyone that wants to get in contact with Paola, I'll put all your contact details in the description down below. But thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure and looking forward to seeing you again.
Catch you later.
Bye-bye.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that podcast there with Paola. Again, she's a great lawyer here in Costa Rica. The good thing is we do have amazing lawyers here. I mean, we've had Paola on it, we've had Sonia on it, we had Marco Fernandez. I mean, we've had a bunch of different lawyers here on the podcast. So I think anytime that anyone's looking for a lawyer here, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. Again, our email is info@investingcostarica.com, info@investingcostarica.com. But I think in a nutshell, Paola said it: trust but verify everything. And, you know, your transaction is only as good as the team and the contract that's on it. So I think getting a great lawyer is definitely a great start. And again, they do have a fiduciary duty to represent you and your interests there. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I was just kind of prodding a little bit there. So yeah. But if you're enjoying the podcast, guys, please subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up there. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, until the next podcast, we'll catch you soon. Bye.
The #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.